Hey, Jason, have you ever heard of a term called Scrum of Scrums? I mean, I've seen this in larger organizations, and I was doing some Googling on it, and I'm struggling to find information about how it even works. Like, what are your experience? What have been your experiences using this concept called Scrum of Scrums?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first things first, Scrum of Scrums is not really part of the Scrum framework. People can look in for themselves of where this came from. It's used more popularly in other frameworks that sort of build on top of Scrum. The idea here is that it's something that you would use when you're in a scaling situation. By scaling, I simply mean you have more than one team building a single product. So imagine instead of just a single Scrum team, we've got, we'll say 3 teams for the sake of just an example, all building the same product, an app, a website, a physical product, whatever. And so there's a couple of things, like basics you need to know about how Scrum works in this multiple team scenario. You still want one product backlog because the product backlog describes how we're going to improve this product, what value we're going to build. You want one definition of done because that's our quality standard. You want one product owner, right? So there's all these shared elements that these multiple teams are going to use. And so there's got to be some level of cross-team coordination. Just real simply, if 3 teams are each going to plan work for a sprint and we have one product backlog, we at least have to coordinate to make sure 2 or 3 teams aren't working on the exact same thing. Like if I'm working on item A, you shouldn't also be working on item A, right? And if I'm working on item A, your team's working on item B, but they have to architecturally align in some way, well, we're going to have some coordination there too. So Scrum of Scrums, as I've seen it used, is simply a way for multiple teams working on the same product to coordinate. And like any tool, I think it can be used to benefit if done well. I think it can be used to detriment if not done well. When it's used to just, hey, let's make sure a couple times a week, maybe every day, although I've personally found that to be overkill. A couple times a week, we are making sure if there's anything that my team has learned, we are sharing it with you really quickly. We're discussing our progress towards the sprint goal and how you're progressing towards your sprint goal, and just sharing information. It can be beneficial, but it's not something that Scrum teams have to use. It's not in the Scrum framework. It's a what I think I would call a complementary practice.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the same thing play out. And I'm going to take a different perspective on it. I'm going to talk about all the disasters I've seen with it, at least a couple in 2 minutes.
I've seen plenty of those too, yep.
Well, first of all, I've done some Googling on this. I can't seem to find a whole lot of information about what's the right way to conduct this.
Yeah,
so think about
kind of
it
a free
as
for
sort
all.
of, it's a bit of a free-for-all. Think of it as like, hey, there's a tool out there. You can read about it. You can make up your own way. But like Jason said, it's about synchronization. So what I've read about other frameworks. So one in particular, which I'm very familiar with, is called the Nexus framework. It's a Scrum.org sort of solution to the SAFe problem, or solution to the scaling problem. SAFe is also a competitor to that solution. They have in there the Nexus Daily Scrum, which is it's an official thing defined by the Nexus framework. It's about getting the right people on your teams together to really talk about dependencies and managing them and making sure overall we're still on track for an integrated increment. With Scrum of Scrums not having that dedicated focus, you got to kind of put it together yourselves. Like, does it make sense to have this meeting? Because they can become big wastes of time really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which leads me to this. Like, the way I've seen it kind of go poorly is just that, where we're running a traditional waterfall style project, and so Scrum of Scrums now it sounds good because, hey, we're doing 2 Scrums in the same meeting, right? Scrum of Scrums. But instead of actually getting the right people in the room to talk about dependencies and make sure we're on track to meet our sprint goals and integrated increments, it turns into a very long meeting where all the project managers really just sync up and just share status. Or even worse, the Scrum Masters get together and report on their teams.
Right.
But how is that different than project managers just doing that job?
Right.
And so with that said, now we've got 1 extra hour of meeting because sometimes it's not time boxed at all. And it just, fills the Outlook appointment. So to sum it up, if they become really, really long, a lot of meeting waste. If they're not focused on actually accomplishing goals, but just reporting status, it's not that useful beyond a sprint review. And so look out for that. It's really easy to fall into that trap just because there isn't a lot of guidance out there about how this is supposed to work and what the expected outcome of a Scrum of Scrums is.
those are really good points, and I agree. And to be clear, I think adopting Nexus and using like a Nexus daily Scrum and something that's a bit more structured but minimal, the way that Scrum is, makes a whole lot more sense than just, let's tack on a meeting here, or let's do Scrum of Scrums because we did that in my last company, and this framework that we bought, and it has a poster and it says we should have one. Like, I'm not advocating that at all. I think adopting a Nexus framework, I think, would make a whole lot more sense. But I don't shy away from it if it's a tool that's actually being used well. I think a lot of the same guidance applies around Scrum of Scrums that I would give for Daily Scrum, right? All the things you just said about, hey, the Scrum of Scrums can go bad this way, this way, this way. It can be too long, it can be too detailed, it can be too task oriented. Like, that's all true of the Daily Scrum too. And so, like, keep that same guidance. I'm not saying they have the same purpose. Daily Scrum has a very specific purpose: inspect your sprint goal and adapt your sprint backlog. But that same sort of guidance about keep it minimal, keep it to the 15 minutes, don't dive into status updates, don't track don't turn into a project management meeting, essentially. I think all that same kind of guidance would apply, at least in my experience, of a Scrum of Scrums. If you're going to have this to solve the cross-team coordination problem, keep it minimal, keep it to just the people who need to be there, and don't go into every little detail of everything and treat this like a project status update. That's not a coordination meeting anymore, and I would hope you don't even need that in the first place.